Thank you for joining me on YouTube and Facebook. Today, I thought we'd have a little chat about Mary Queen of Scots because we're near to her birthday. Her birthday is in 2 days' time. So yeah, also got some things coming up to tell you about. I also recently I've been to Hatfield House for their Christmas installation. So I can tell you a little bit about that. Although most of you are abroad, but I've got a reel on Instagram, so you can have a little look at it as well if you're interested. But first of all, I want to say thank you, please, to Lucy, Sam, Gina, Kathy, Krista, Carmen, and Jamie, who've all become members of my Patreon in the last couple of weeks, which is brilliant timing because this Sunday we have the postponed book club. So our meeting. Book club meeting, should I say. So our book club meeting is about this book, The Sisters Who Would Be Queen by Leanda de Lisle, all about the Grey sisters, Jane, Catherine and Mary. And we'll be discussing that book. If you are interested in book club, but you can come along to the book club meetings anyway, by the way, even if you haven't read or finished the book, because the discussions are about history that you'd be interested in anyway. But the next meeting after this one is 14th. I'm just looking for my notes. 14th of January, pretty sure it is. And we will be discussing Tracy Borman's book, Anne Boleyn and Elizabeth I, because it's so that will be the first book of the year. Here we go. The full listing for the year, if you're interested. 14th of January, we're discussing Tracy Borman's book, Anne Boleyn and Elizabeth. Then we're discussing on the 10th of March, Gareth Russell's book, The Palace, about Hampton Court Palace. Then on the 12th of May, we'll be discussing Nicola Tallis's book, Uncrowned Queen, The Fateful Life of Margaret Beaufort. In July, 7th of July, the meeting is to discuss the book Elfrida, or Elfrith, really, by Elizabeth Norton. And then 8th of September, we'll be discussing Helen Carr's book on John of Gaunt called The Red Prince. And we finish off the year on the 10th of November with John Guy and Julia Fox's Hunting the Falcon, Henry VIII, Anne Boleyn, and the Marriage That Shook Europe. So we've got some fantastic books lined up for next year. All those dates are already in. Designed as well, hopefully, that everyone can get hold of those books and has a decent amount of time to read them before we have our little get together. So if you're interested in book club, just all you have to do is join my Patreon. It's patreon.com/British history, which is my favorite way for you to support me in my work. You can though also buy badges on Instagram, super chats on YouTube, and stars on Facebook. Right, so today's topic, she says, looking around for her notes, Mary, Queen of Scots. It was so she was born on the 8th of December, 1542, and she's one of these figures in history that we could debate her forever, I think. She's actually incredibly interesting to some, not very interesting to others. Melissa, book club is within Patreon. So let me just explain, sorry, because Melissa's just asked. If you're in book club, you go into Patreon and there will be a post in there which has the link, and we have a Zoom meeting basically. Sorry, so book club, yeah, it's on Zoom. And that's how you find the link. Hello everyone, and it's still joining on Instagram. Sorry, I was a bit late starting today, so it's probably only just letting you know that I'm on. Things are taking me a little bit longer than they used to. Now I'm down to 9.5 digits. Excuse me. Anyway, so yes, so we're close to the birthday of Mary Queen of Scots. Like I say, born 8th of December 1542. And I thought, because I mentioned this last week, that I will do a focus on her and the controversy around her her third marriage and the murder of her second husband. So that's how we're going to play that one today. Um, and I mentioned it last week because I had been reading some journal articles written by Leslie Smith. Leslie Smith is the curator at Tutbury Castle, but she's also the holder of an MPhil in. Who's brought me a badge? Rennie, thank you so much for my badge on Instagram. Very grateful. Thank you. If anyone else would like to buy me a badge, it does help. Helps me towards petrol and things like that, and books that I have an obsession with, and I really need to learn to read quicker so that I can read more. But yeah, so I've been reading. Leslie kindly sent me through some of her journal articles. So she is a medical historian, and she specializes in late 16th century women's healthcare medicine. And actually, I recorded an interview with her, which will go live in a well, as soon as I've edited it, but it will go live to patrons, so members of my Patreon, a week before everyone else. But it's an hour, and then I've got a little bonus section for patrons. But she talks about women's history. I was fascinated to know when I spoke to her about how women understood their bodies, whether they actually understood them a little bit better than we do, although we're more advanced in terms of our knowledge. I'm fascinated by the idea that actually, have we lost a little bit by not being as so in tune? We're very reliant on being told what's happening rather than sort of intuitively understanding ourselves. So anyway, so we got into all that sort of thing. So that interview with Leslie will be available within the next few weeks. So before Christmas, it'd be a little Christmas present for everybody. But one of the journal articles that Leslie sent through was about Mary Queen of Scots, and it's on the history of contraception within the Journal for Family Planning and Reproductive Healthcare, and it was published in 2008. So, because she's got her theories here on the miscarriage that that Mary had, and I'll go into explaining when that happened and why it's evidence to do with maybe implications in. Well, let's go into it. But basically, Mary has a miscarriage of twins just before she escapes to England, where she then spends 19 years in prison. Tutbury Castle, where Leslie Smith is the curator, was actually her first official prison. But in the article, Leslie talks about, and I've spoken about this before because of what I know from Leslie's work about Mary's physique. She was, I'm imagining as a fellow CrossFitter, no, I'm imagining as a CrossFitter, I'm imagining she would be one today. She was statuesque in her height. I'm not, but I'll pretend. 5'11", Mary was. So equivalent, I mean, she's probably one of the tallest women in Europe at the time. She's fit, she's healthy, she's strong. She is beautiful. She's the first woman to have played a round of golf. I don't know what form golf took in this time, but at St Andrews, she could ride 40 miles. She rode 40 miles in one day at one point, and that means she's incredibly strong and fit. Mary was Queen of two nations, so we know her obviously as Mary Queen of Scots, which she became at 6 days old with the death of her father James V, who died of battle wounds, and she became Queen of France at the age of 16. Now, this is where things all start to go incredibly sour in terms of her relationship with Elizabeth. Well, in fact, no, they go sour on the death of Mary I, because at the death of Mary I, Catholic Europe doesn't consider Elizabeth as the rightful heir to Mary I. They consider Mary Queen of Scots the rightful heir, and that's down to back to the divorce or not of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. So Catholic Europe doesn't accept that there's been a divorce. Therefore, the marriage which took place while Catherine was still alive between Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth's mother, was not valid, and therefore Elizabeth, born of that marriage, was not legitimate and therefore couldn't inherit the throne. So when Mary dies, when Mary I of England dies, the French king, I think it's Henri II, makes a big show of the fact that they're saying Mary is now the rightful heir to England. This, of course, rubs Elizabeth's ambassadors and therefore Elizabeth up the wrong way. It puts her there as a clear threat to Mary. So despite the fact that Elizabeth had her illegitimacy reversed by the English Parliament, that wasn't holding any sway further afield. The other thing that I think is often not talked about and overlooked is that Mary, Queen of Scots, represents something that Elizabeth can't do, and that is create a potential peace between England and France should she become Queen of England. And I can see how that would be a draw for many people, that idea that we could have, especially in France, but that we could have peace between the two countries, I think is one that we should consider would be in people's minds at that time. So she's dangerous to Elizabeth. She's physically attractive. She's physically fit. She is she's considered by many to be the rightful, legitimate heir to the throne, with a better claim than Elizabeth, if Elizabeth indeed had a claim in their eyes. So, and she could bring potential peace between England and France. So, so when Mary becomes captive in England, Elizabeth is in a very sticky spot. Right. The threat of her is only one part of it, however. So, so Mary right. Let's look at some key dates. 10th of February, 1567. Mary's second husband, Lord Darnley, who's also her cousin, and therefore also a cousin of Elizabeth, so they're all kin. He is murdered at Kirkerfields. The house is blown up, but he appears to have escaped with a servant and then been killed in the gardens. So it starts to look like not an accident, clearly. Even the explosion would have supposed to be looked like an accident. He would have been blown up in it, but he wasn't. So he was murdered in the gardens. So it's clear that it's a murder and not an accident, like it was planned to be. Now, Mary and Darnley are already estranged at this point. He's promiscuous, to say the least. He has contracted syphilis. He got treatment for syphilis in Glasgow in the January of 1567, so a month before he dies. He is implicated heavily in a group of his supporters and himself had murdered Mary's private secretary, David Rizzio, in front of her while she was 7 months pregnant the previous year. And so they are not getting on, to say the least. So when he dies in highly suspicious circumstances, clearly murdered on the 10th of February 1567, Mary is somehow is implicated as well. The prime suspect is the Earl of Bothwell. Now, Mary marries him on the 15th of May. So Mary, who's estranged from Darnley, then marries in a very short space of time, marries the chief suspect in her husband's murder. So here we get to the reason why the miscarriage later on is so important, because it was claimed and maintained that Mary was abducted by Bothwell, taken to his castle at Dunbar, and it's the middle of the day, but he forced himself upon her, and therefore she had to marry him. So he basically claimed her, if you like, in the most base way, and that she would then have to marry him. However, there's other circumstantial evidence around whether that could be true or whether that's a cover-up for the fact that Mary was actually already in a relationship with Bothwell. That 40-mile ride that I said about earlier that she made was to see Bothwell on a previous occasion. She was held for 10 days at Dunbar Castle. During that time, Bothwell wasn't there. Sorry, she was held there, and for 10 days while she was at Dunbar Castle, Bothwell had actually gone to Edinburgh to secure a divorce, his divorce from his, I don't know his wife's name, but anyway, divorce for himself so that he was free to marry Mary. And there's no evidence that she tries to escape during that time that she is alone. Maybe there was an opportunity, but she certainly manages to escape later on when she's not as physically fit. So that seems odd. So it goes down as this possible, right. But like I said, she openly despised her second husband. Anyway, so she is there's a final battle. They lose. She's caught, and she's taken to Lochleven Castle. There, she miscarries twins. I got the date that she miscarries down. She miscarries twins on the 24th of July. So she's married Bothwell on the 15th of May, and she is reported to miscarry twins on the 24th of July. And the reason why that is, so that's recorded by a man called Claude Nau, N-A-U. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that. He wasn't there at the time, but he was part of Mary's entourage, her household for the last 10 years of her life. And he's well respected, and his papers were posthumously published in the 19th century under the title of The History of Mary Stuart. Elizabeth's ambassador, I hope that did, that didn't get off. Elizabeth's ambassador, Nicholas Throckmorton, actually visited Mary at Lochleven and explained to him, or he gleaned from her refusal to divorce Bothwell. And she stated that it was because she was pregnant. Basically, she was with child. It was a kind of secret, but still at that point it wasn't too far gone, and therefore she didn't want to divorce him because she would be willingly making her children illegitimate. Her ambassador, meanwhile, to England said that the Queen could not but marry him, seeing he had ravished her. So it's the debate is, did Bothwell ravish her, or was she actually already having a relationship with Bothwell and was a willing bride? So in Leslie's paper, she goes into the timelines. Now, there's no medical equipment there. She's been there and it's poor lighting. It would be very difficult. She also consulted other, obstetricians and gynecologists to ask, well, how easily identifiable would it be at certain progressions of the pregnancy to identify twins? Because what doesn't seem to be in question is that they were twins, and a very early miscarriage would probably be impossible to identify without modern equipment, without even good lighting where she was. So there was three possible theories she went into. One was that the babies were actually Darnley's and were conceived before he died in the February. However, that would have made her between 20 and 22 weeks pregnant, which would have been, especially for a second pregnancy and with twins, would have been very difficult to conceal. And this appears to be a pregnancy that's not talked about until she miscarries. So then you have the possibility that it was that they were conceived after the 24th of April, when Bothwell supposedly took Mary. That would make the pregnancy quite short, and therefore it's questionable about whether you could identify the twins, the babies as twins or not. Which sort of, and there's no way to prove this either way, I don't think, but it starts to push you in the direction that these babies were actually conceived before Bothwell's supposed abduction of Mary, and therefore it would then not have been a sort of forced marriage, but possibly one that Mary was completely involved in the relationship and then wanting to marry, presumably because she knew she was pregnant. So it's fascinating. There's more information thrown up to maybe look at something that we think of, a story that we think is familiar. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I think maybe if that is the case, then Bothwell's had a bad rap through history. So what have we got? Amanda says, I still don't understand the logic behind the explosion. You'd think a nice quiet house fire would have done the job better. Yes, it was a whole gunpowder malarkey, wasn't it? I think it was supposed to be belt and braces, but it didn't I was going to say go off very well. I don't mean the gunpowder, that went off, but Ali says, I think she could have somehow gotten through Darnley's murder if she hadn't married or sided even with Bothwell. And that's what makes me wonder, she already knew she was pregnant. If it had gone to plan, and I'm just surmising here, if it had gone to plan and Bothwell dies in an accidental explosion at Kirkerfields, then she's free to marry. It would have still looked like, I still think it would have looked like questionable haste. But saying that, everyone already knows that they're estranged, already knows that he's syphilis ridden. So, maybe that's not quite surprising. It's not like Catherine Parr when she marries Thomas Seymour so soon after Henry VIII dies, because they're supposed to be in a well, I've got to say, just Henry VIII didn't have normal marriages, but they're not estranged, they're still getting on. Mela says, conception before the ravishing makes sense as explained, recognizing the twins. Yes. And so Darnley had syphilis, most definitely. He was treated for syphilis in Glasgow, January, so the month before he died. The other thing that you have to think as well, one incident, if you're trying to get pregnant, there's an incredibly short window as to when you can get pregnant. It would have to have been the exact right time for one incident to have created a pregnancy. Not obviously impossible, it does happen, but it's worth, again, thinking about, or considering, should I say. Yeah, Amanda says, yep, throw Bothwell under the bus and look surprised at the news. And this is it. I don't think so. The summation is that actually Elizabeth did suspect that her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, not only was implicated in, which she was publicly at the time, implicated in the murder of her second husband, Darnley, because they did, for all the reasons they didn't get on. He was unfaithful. He'd murdered her best friend. It's a pretty big one. That Elizabeth actually knew or suspected that the relationship with Bothwell had begun outside of marriage and within Mary's second marriage. Remember, they're all still cousins as well. to her cousin. So PM at McDowell, I wonder if she knew she was pregnant after beginning her relationship after her husband was murdered. Well, that's kind of the question, is was she actually already in the relationship with Bothwell before her husband was murdered? Because she was heavily implicated in his murder. And so when she comes to England, thinking that because she's the rightful queen in Scotland, that Elizabeth is going to give her troops and she's going to be able to go back over the border and take back her throne, or at least become regent for her son, who she's been deposed in favour of, forcibly abdicated in favour of. That doesn't happen. And why doesn't that happen? There could be a variety of reasons, but if Elizabeth is, and she was, aware that Mary's implicated in the murder of her own cousin, that, so like I say, they're all cousins, Darnley, then Elizabeth is always thinking about what her position looks like. What does she look like to everyone else? What does it say about her position? How dangerous does it put what kind of danger does it put her in to support Mary? So there's the implication, heavy implication, that Mary's involved in the murder of Darnley. But like I said before as well, Mary is 9 years younger than Elizabeth. She is physically beautiful and strong and healthy at this point. Well, she's already been through quite a bit, actually, to be fair, but she's an impressive woman. She could bring potential peace between France and England if she was Queen of England as well as Scotland. And Mary never, ever lets up that that she has a right to the throne and that she wants Elizabeth to name her in the succession. She never lets up on that. And that is, to my mind, that's a big part of her undoing. Is it known where she miscarried? Is DNA analysis possibility? No. So she miscarries at Lochleven Castle, where she was imprisoned and then escapes from. This is what I'm saying. She's physically impressive. And no, there would have been. This would have been, well, we don't know how old the twins, how developed the twins would have been, but it's before that's a possibility. Beverly says Elizabeth had distanced herself when Dudley's wife Amy was killed because she knew how it would appear to others if she had done. And Mary, so similar idea, isn't it? If Elizabeth is wary all the time of how it looks to other people, how that might affect her position, and does it put her in danger? And I think it would have done. And of course, as time moves on, so Mary is in captivity in England for 19 years in the end. And as time moves on, Elizabeth is more and more convinced by her counsellors, who don't like Mary, that while Mary lives, there is a big threat to Elizabeth. I mean, so she's executed in 1588, get the Armada. So it didn't work. But interestingly, no one comes for Mary while she's in captivity. She's a useful figurehead. They're not bothered about her and her person, which must have been frustrating and upsetting for Mary herself. So, but the interview that I did with Leslie Smith about just women's health in the 16th century, that is going to be available, like I say, within this month, so before Christmas. Amanda says she had to be a minimum of 10 to 12 weeks along for the fetuses to be visible twins. And of course, we say 10 weeks pregnant, and we're always, so for boys in the audience, I don't know if you know this, but whenever a woman says she's 10 weeks pregnant, it's actually 8 weeks from conception, because the way we calculate it. Don't know why we say it, but yeah. So it's actually, 8 weeks. 10 weeks pregnant is 8 weeks growth. Yeah, I find Mary fascinating, and anyone who came to the Tudors Online History Festival will know uh, that during our live Q&A, one of the questions was about sort of least liked Tudors, or most overrated, or least liked, most disliked Tudors for all the panel to answer. And if you were there, and if you want to, I can tell you how to get hold of this, but you'll know why Tracy Borman found Mary Queen of Scots to be the most dislikable Tudor. If you do want to get hold of that, by the way, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Philippa, and you can buy the pack of all of the talks. So there were 7 talks, a live Q&A session with all of the speakers, and then a like little closing quiz as well, which was quite fun. You can also for less money add it to your ticket if you want to come to the Stuarts Online History Festival. The Stuarts are returning. This is our second time doing the Stuarts next March, and you can get tickets for the Online History Festival. There's some early bird tickets still available, actually, and you can do that by going, I'm waiting for it to scroll around so I can remember exactly, by going to the Stuarts 2024, Stuarts, STUARTS, the Stuarts 2024.eventbrite.co.uk. So you can get your early bird ticket for that, and you can add on the talk bundle from the Tudors Online History Festival if you want. You could also add the one on from the Georgians and the one on from the first Stuarts Festival. You can knock yourself out. Or if you want them standalone, slightly more money, but only by a couple of pounds, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Philippa, PHILIPPA, and you can get them there. So they're well worth it. It was a really good event. And we've got 4 speakers confirmed for March, and we've got 1 who I think is confirmed today. So when I can, I will announce that for you. There's 2 places that I thought I'd mention to you today that I've been to in the last week. One was Worcester. I went to the Victorian Christmas markets, which is great. And while I was in Worcester, we wanted a little bit of quiet time because it gets ever so busy. And so we went over to Worcester Cathedral and went and just checked out the tomb of Arthur again, Arthur's Chantry. So Arthur Tudor is buried at Worcester Cathedral. He died at Ludlow Castle, but he's buried at Worcester Cathedral. And that is it was precedented because King John also has his tomb there. And the chest tomb that King John has was actually put there to sort of tie it in with Arthur Tudor's chest tomb as well. Before that, it was just a slab on the floor. I say just a slab with the oldest lifelike effigy of a king of England in it. But there you go. Because John is the first king who spent any, real time in England because he lost all the lands abroad. But there you go. So yeah, so I dropped into Worcester. But the biggest sort of journey I've done this week was down to Hatfield House. So if you want to have a look at my reel about this, it was cool. So Hatfield House this is their little leaflet that always goes with it. Hatfield House is it's the place to which Elizabeth, when she was Princess Elizabeth, was she was there actually under arrest by the orders of her half sister Mary. She was at Hatfield when she found out that Mary had died, and so therefore she was actually queen. The house itself, most of it was taken down and replaced by the son of Elizabeth's right-hand man, Cecil. His son rebuilt it, and it came into his hands because the Cecils, stop me if you're bored, but the Cecils had a place called Tybbalds, spelt Theobalds, but it's Tybbalds. And when James I, James VI of Scotland, became James I of England, so Mary Queen of Scots' son, it all ties in nicely. When he came down and he stayed at Tybbalds, he decided he liked that, so he did a swap with the Cecils, and they had Hatfield, so they rebuilt it. But Part of it is still there that Elizabeth would recognise. The Great Hall, where she held her first council meeting, is still there. But for their Christmas thing, they've done Christmas revels hosted by Queen Elizabeth I, which was such a nice idea. And they go into the Tudor traditions around Christmas. So if you're in the Hertfordshire area, then do go take a look. I would suggest going after dark. So it goes dark about 4 o'clock. Go after dark so that you can see it all lit up. It's beautiful. If you're not around, I know a lot of you aren't anywhere near, then please take a look at my reel on Instagram, because I've captured it for you there. So that was nice. So I'm getting out and about a bit more now. Tomorrow, well, the next 2 days, I'm on it's not top secret. The Had girls are getting together. We're making plans. And so look out for us posting random rubbish probably on History After Dark. But we're getting together. We have some interesting and fun ways of telling you history coming up. But before I leave, let me just remind you that tonight at 8:15 p.m. we are History After Dark live on YouTube. We have Julian Humphreys. He'll be tackling the apparently very controversial and sticky issue of the Napoleon film. And from that, we will see where the discussion goes. But feel free to come and speak, ask questions for come with your questions for Julian. You can catch an interview with him on my YouTube channel if you want to become more familiar with him before tonight. The Battle of Tewkesbury. He talked to me about the Battle of Tewkesbury. He's very, very funny and very knowledgeable. Yeah, I think it's Hertfordshire, man. Yeah, Hatfield. I plugged it into the sat nav and headed the car there. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Hertfordshire, just north of London, off the M25. Anyway, a bit further north. So everyone, I hope to see you tonight at History After Dark. Otherwise, I will see you back here again for Tea Time History Chat Live next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And like I say, I've said before, if you've got any topics you'd like me to cover, let me know, because sometimes the hardest thing about preparing for these is thinking about what to talk about. So if you're going to miss Had tonight, don't worry. As long as we don't say anything too bad, it will still be on YouTube for you to catch up on. Okay, everyone. Right. I'm going to say goodbye and leave you to your day. So thank you so much for joining. See you again soon. Bye. Bye, everyone.